Oh, here we are. And we are live. And thank you for joining us here at Infinite Inquisition, which is a Dark Horse Paranormal production. And I have Rosemary Thornton with me today talking about near death experiences. So if you want to join us here live, that's awesome here on the Pun Network. And once again, thank you for being here such short notice here, guys. Now, Rose, if I can call you Rose, if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk about your near-death experience, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Well, a few years ago, well, I guess about 20 years ago now, I became known as an expert in a funny little niche topic of Sears homes, and that was my thing. And then in 2006, or actually 2007, I married the man I thought was the love of my life. About 10 years later, he killed himself, ended his life at our home, and I'm a writer, sensitive soul, and it was devastating beyond what anyone could easily describe or explain. And I was in pretty bad shape, lived out of my car briefly. The house ended up in foreclosure, just very difficult times. Fortunately, I was able to sell the house before it went to foreclosure, but there are no words really to describe how suicide changes your life, especially when it's your husband. And I mean, I lost my place in society. I lost my financial standing, social standing, economic standing, everything. Friends went away, on and on and on. At 29 months, 29 months after his suicide, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer stage 2. And I had prayed every night. I mean, I had been a woman, I guess, of great faith. I had prayed every night, 3 prayers, which was simply, God, either heal me or let me die. I knew I was a wreck. I was losing weight. I couldn't stop losing weight. I couldn't eat. Lost 40 pounds in a fairly short period of time. I mean, you get the picture. It was trauma. It was severe. It was awful. I pretty much had a psychotic break and had to have somebody move into my home, another home, take care of me.
Mm.
And I mean, I had gone from being an author that travels all over the country giving these talks and had a great memory and had a great career to end to a place that I couldn't even cook for myself. I couldn't take care of a dog. So this
Um,
very dear friend moved into our home, my home. Well, we obtained a rental home, and he took care of me for about 2 years. And then I was diagnosed with stage 2 cancer. And I thought, wow, God, I said, either heal me or let me die. I didn't say let me linger from a horrible disease. And my other prayer, pretty interestingly, I asked God every night 3 things: heal me or let me die. Number 2 was no life review. I knew I was not going to survive this. I knew that I'd be dead in a couple of years. Nobody can survive that much trauma, or so I had told myself. My third prayer was, I was so tired of decisions. I had faced a lot of legal problems. A lot of big decisions had to be made. I had serious decision fatigue. And I'd always thought of myself as something of a smart cookie. I'd been a newspaper reporter and had some success with that as well. So to go from that to losing your mind and not being able to trust your own thoughts and to
wow.
think of yourself as erudite and educated and smart and all those other good things, competent, capable, successful, to the point that um, I couldn't even make a cake. I literally got one of those box mixes for a cake. I wanted to make a cake one night. This is about a year and a half out after he had killed himself. And
Wow.
I read the directions and it said, I think it was 3 eggs, some oil, and some water, and put the mix in, and I couldn't comprehend it. And I realized I lost my ability to read. And
Mm.
so I handed off the handed off the mix to my friend and said, I don't know what this is saying. I can't put this together. And it took me, it was about 2 years out that I had to reteach myself how to read with juvenile books. So
Wow.
it's just, there are no words to explain what that did to me. So diagnosed with cancer, I thought, God, I was pretty clear. I wanted this to be over quick, not die from this disease. And went in for a cervical biopsy. They made some pretty big mistakes. Sent me home even though I was bleeding profusely after the
Wow.
biopsy, and I mean profusely. I told the RN that was attending me, I said, I'm 59 years old. I understand you're saying bleeding is normal, but there is no way this is normal.
Mm.
Despite that, I told her that 2 more times, 3 times total, had a witness. She sent me home anyway. She said, honey, once you get home and lie down, you'll feel fine. Well, once
Wow.
I got home, by the way, I ruined my friend's car seat because I just kept bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. This was even though there were many hospital pads between me and that nice leather cushion. And once I got home, I realized I was dying. Early in this process, after my husband's death, 29 months earlier, somebody had read me a Bible verse from Corinthians, which said, God will show you a way out. And now I'm bleeding to death back at home. I went and stood in my nice, pretty white tiled shower because I had white carpet in the house. And of course, when you're bleeding to death, housekeeping is your number one priority. You don't want to make a mess. We're
Right.
all so well behaved, aren't we?
Right.
So I went and stood in my shower and I thought about that Bible verse and I thought, you know what? This is my way out. I didn't do this to myself. I had dealt with suicidal temptations ever since my husband had ended his life. You know, when the smartest man you've ever met decides that's a way out, it's hard not to think that might be a path for you too,
Right.
especially after you lose everything. So
Mm.
standing in that shower, I thought a lot about that. And I thought, you know what? This may be God's mercy. And I seriously considered sitting down on that shower floor and just letting it end that way. And honestly, I would have, except the two friends who had brought me home from the hospital were sitting in my living room, and they had been very faithful and kind and good to me. And I thought, how fair is that to them? Walk
Yeah.
out into this master bathroom, find me splayed on the floor, a mess.
Mm.
So I left that shower. I stepped out of that shower and into the living room, wrapped myself in lots and lots of towels because, again, I'm very concerned about that carpet. Wall-to-wall
Right.
carpet, cleaning up after that's such a nightmare.
I
So
bet.
anyway,
White
I,
carpet.
yeah, I told them to call 911. They did. Taken by ambulance to a itty bitty ER, and it was a standalone ER, not affiliate or not connected to a hospital.
Hmm.
And there I had an RN about my age to the side of my gurney and a young doctor. I was surprised I didn't see the word play school on her stethoscope, frankly.
Oh my goodness.
But she was very young, and when she examined me, she said, "There's so much blood I can't see anything."
Mm.
But more to the point, when I looked in her eyes, I saw she was frightened, and I thought, that is not good. And the RN who was attending me, I was pretty frightened by now because, I mean, I had been very healthy. This was my first hospital experience outside of having 3 babies.
Right.
And here was a mess. So I grabbed this RN's hand, who's to my left, very motherly, sweet-natured, solicitous woman, and I said, "Promise me you're not gonna let me die." And she said, "Oh, honey, we have many solutions for this. We're not gonna let you die, I promise." And then they gave me a shot of Dilaudid for pain. Dilaudid is a derivative of morphine, pretty powerful stuff.
Mhm.
And what they did not factor in, and this is very disappointing, they did not take me seriously, I guess. I had already lost a tremendous amount of blood. So when they gave me that shot of Dilaudid, it was very powerful. And I
And
think it was probably less than 60 seconds I lost consciousness.
wow.
And that was my last earthly memory of this was almost my last words on this earth were, "That's some good stuff." And then that was the last I remember of all of this. And the next thing I knew, I woke out of a deep, dreamless sleep, and I was being catapulted out of my body. And I mean, it was jarring. It wasn't some soft little event. In fact, I remember, and I don't know really. Again, there's words defy me. I mean, I'm a writer. I'm a wordsmith. I've written 9 books, hundreds of newspaper articles, hundreds of magazine articles. But it was as though there was a silver cord attached from the crown of my head to the heel of my feet,
Oh, wow.
and that somebody had reeled back like an archer's bow and popped it. And when that snap hit my back, that's when I went flying out of the body. And I
Oh,
mean, it
wow.
all happened at once. We like to think of a timeline, past, present, and future. It just all kind of happened at once. And hence, I began floating away from my body in this perfect, velvety blackness, all encompassing, very comforting, very comfortable. Comfort was a verb as well as a noun. This blackness was actively comforting me. And the first words out of my mouth in this new experience, and I'm a writer, neurotic, as we all are, and my very first words spoken out loud were, "My heart has stopped." And I thought, how do I know that? I thought, I don't know how I know that, but I know that's right. And then I thought, "You're dying." Again, I'm speaking out loud, which I think is pretty cool because I sound just like I've always sound like I sound now. And then my
Mhm.
next thought was, "Oh, actually, you're not dying, you're dead." Because, when you're going on to your reward, the most important thing is proper grammar.
Mhm.
And I laughed out loud because I thought that's pretty funny. Here I am going on to the next experience, and I'm correcting my grammar, and I still have my very moribund sense of humor. And I laughed out loud, and I heard my giggle when I said, "Actually, you're not dying, you're dead." I heard my funny little giggle. And what was so cool, I mean, so I guess it was kind of an aha moment because I realized I don't have breath sounds. I
Oh, wow.
don't think I have vocal cords. And yet I am still producing sound the same way I always have. I still have this funny little sense of humor. And I had all my memories. I mean, there were so many thoughts almost happening concurrently. But one of them was, oh, there were just so many thoughts all at once. But one of them was, I've always wondered, being a writer, we're overthinkers. If you look up the word overthinker in the dictionary, there's a picture of a writer, I'm sure.
Right.
We ruminate, we think too much, we get agitated pretty easy because we're always thinking of every possible scenario. And I thought my whole life I wondered what was going to take me out. And here I am, born and raised a Christian Scientist, and it's a medical mistake that kills me. My first time involved in the medical world, and they kill me. I thought that was really pretty funny. I thought it was an interesting way for a writer to go. I could not have written an ending better than that. And I also remember thinking, my whole life I've been worried about, would my end be painful? Would it be difficult? Would it be vexing? And I thought, gosh, I wish I'd known years ago how this was going to end. I wouldn't have been so nervous. I also remember thinking, one more thing checked off my list. Don't need to worry about dying because I'm doing it. And one of the thoughts I had, I was having a pretty good time.
Right.
One of the thoughts I had, I thought about a lot of Bible verses, but one of them was Paul wrote about the peace of God that passeth all understanding. And I thought, this is that peace. All my life I had suffered from anxiety and fears and worries and woes. And after hearing that funny little giggle, I thought to myself, what exactly did I leave behind on that gurney? And I thought I left the anxiety, the worries, the PTSD I had suffered since my husband's tragic ending. I thought everything negative stayed behind, but everything that's good is with me. Even that funny sense of humor, it's all with me. I didn't really leave anything behind. And sometimes we hear people say there is no death. You're like, yeah, whatever. But really there isn't, because everything we are goes with us. And I had so many memories and so many thoughts. And early on in the experience, again, defining a timeline is very difficult. Albert Einstein said, to those of us who are committed physicists, the past, present, and future are only an illusion, however persistent. And I think that's right, because I can't say this happened and then that happened and then this happened. It just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, I felt, I really, again, still floating away from my body in this blackness, I realized I was being accompanied by I had been joined by a massive spiritual being. And I looked up to my left, kind of tilted my head back to see who had joined me, because this presence was very distinctive. And even as I did this, I thought, that's pretty interesting. I'm looking over my left shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some human-esque form in this new experience. It was just so much to take in, but it was all good. And so I sensed this being, but again, I'm in this perfect blackness. And I said, literally with a lilt in my voice, and I said, and who are you? And the answer was immediate. Before I could even finish the sentence, the answer was, you are the image and likeness. I'm the original. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's Genesis 1:26 and 27, a Bible verse that I'd always found interesting, but pretty confusing, that we're made in the image and likeness of God. But to hear it defined in those terms, and the thing is, it didn't just come with words, it came with an infusion of knowing. And I've heard other NDEers say that. And I thought, I don't get that. But this, the Bible says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now I got it. Words have power. The Bible says the Word of God started creation. And I got that because these weren't just words. I got it. I got the meaning. I think about that. You're the image and likeness. I'm the original. This happened more than almost 3.5 years ago. I think about that every day. And sometimes I think about it multiple times a day. But this went on. And one of the things that was revealed to me, I remember floating away, still floating in this black room. And I remember thinking, I've been in this experience before. I've been in this blackness within this consciousness. I've been here before. And I asked an angel, spiritual companion that was right with me. Now, this is not the large being, but another being, I guess. And the answer was, remember, your mom told you when you were a baby, you almost died and were, in fact, given up for dead at one point. And the angel said, you didn't almost die. You came over and you got sent back then. And I thought that makes so much sense, because my whole life I've been very sensitive to hearing and seeing things other people didn't hear and see, like just knowing things, And I'd always been such an oddball in school. Frankly, it was not an easy experience. And I remember thinking, I'm 59 years old. I never knew that. This explains so much my whole life, ever since Raymond Moody's book came out, Life After Life. I think it's 76, that little paperback. I'd read that thing so many times I wore it out. I read every NDE I could find and read them again and again and again, Dannion Brinkley and Betty Eadie and, oh gosh, Return from Tomorrow, George Ritchie. I read all of them, fascinated by every story I could find. And I thought, this makes a lot of sense now. I was fascinated by them because as a child, tiny baby, apparently I'd been here before. And this, again, so much happened within this experience. And at one point, I swear it feels like somebody took my batteries out. I ended up no longer floating, but on my feet. And I was now standing in a white room. And despite my best energies and efforts, I have no memory of how I left that floating and ended up in that white room. But I'm on, kind of looking around like, well, how did I get here? I was in a white room on my feet. And I remember thinking, well, at the time, I remember thinking, I don't know if I have feet or legs, but I see a door at the other end of this white room. And I think, I know what that door is. Another very dominant emotion throughout this thing was gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
I really felt that I had been granted an early release for good behavior. After my husband's suicide, I just lost my mind. And I really felt like this was God's mercy that I'd been let out of this thing. And also, I was supposed to start chemotherapy, once a week chemotherapy and daily radiation in, I think it was like 4 or 5 days ahead. And I thought, that's not a problem now, is it? But what's amazing to me, I remember thinking, this is great. This is so good. I was so grateful to be out of this experience. I was just so grateful. And several people have said, how could you be so grateful to be dead? And I said, well, I wasn't dead. I was just going on to the next great adventure and it was over. I mean, who doesn't worry about how they're going to end?
Right.
It was over.
It's a
It'd
very
been honest.
thing.
Yeah. Honestly, it'd not really been that big a deal. I was pretty terrified at the time. I was bleeding to death. But so in this white room, I was on something approximating feet, and I saw that door ahead of me, but the door was closed, and I knew what that door meant. That door meant that was the place from which there's no coming back. And it didn't matter. I was not coming back. I knew that. There's just so many ways I knew that I was done. So I start to walk, and there's this a white mist falling in this room, almost like a fog. It's very thick, and yet it's a very active mist. I mean, the droplets aren't just falling, they're swirling around me and moving, and like each one has life, like each one has power or something. Each were individually moving in perfect harmony, but not moving in unison. So I tried to focus on an individual droplet in this white room. And I remember thinking, I know that sounds kind of nuts, but I felt like I should be able to focus on an individual droplet. You think about that. If you're in a fog, do you say, hey, I think I can focus in on one of those droplets? But the angelic being that was with me said, your spiritual eyes have not acclimated to this new environment, but each droplet is a particle of light, and you're being showered, washed clean with light. And it was explained to me that some people come to this place what's the word? They're just so, with the disease process so heavily imprinted on their thought or their consciousness that they think it's part of their identity, mental illness or disease or whatever.
I can see
And yeah, and the purpose of the white room and the showering of these particles of light is to wash that away and restore our inherent perfection. As a
Mhm.
friend of mine said, leave your muddy boots at the door.
Mhm.
So walking across this expanse, and 15, 25 feet, I don't know. I was trying to get to that door just as fast as I could. That was my priority. It was conveyed to me, and I don't know the words, but it was conveyed to me that if I agreed to return, uh, I would be healed. And it wasn't even expressed of don't worry about that cancer or don't worry about that PTSD or don't worry about this or that. It was just explained to me that I'd be restored to wholeness. And again, I can't even say I know the words, but it was made clear. Well, I get to the door, and I'm very excited now because this is almost over, and I want to go through the door so badly, just so badly. I mean, I guess my whole life I had this incredibly strong knowing that the earth is not my home. As the old African American spirituals said, this earth is not my home. I'm just passing through.
Mhm.
And I knew that. Man, ever since I was a kid, I knew that. I knew this wasn't home. This was a weird foreign place we get dropped off at for apparently to serve 70 to 80 years before we get out. So I just couldn't wait to get home. And it felt like the beings that were with me, it was so clear that they knew me. They knew me well. They knew me. They loved me. They liked me. I felt home. It felt like I had come home after being away for 59 years. And it just felt so great. We hear so much about God loves us. Well, God likes us. and it's not like, you know what, if you could do this or that better, then we'd really be on, Team Rosemary. No, where is as is. I felt loved. I felt accepted. And I just, it was just so wonderful, after all this torture from my husband's suicide. And I loved my husband. I loved him dearly. I thought we were soulmates. We used to go to bed early at night just so we could read our books together. We'd read to each other at night.
Mm.
Uh, we had big parties and we just had a really good time. We used to travel all the time to go to museums. I mean, I really thought I'd found the perfect mate for me. So this was not just grief and loss. This was, how could he do this? So in this white room, I'm thinking, you know what? I didn't do this to myself. I mean, throughout this whole experience, that was one of the prevalent thoughts, was I did not off myself. My children will not have the burden of knowing their mother killed
Right.
herself. And I was just so grateful, so profoundly grateful. And as I approached that door, I put my right hand up to push through the door, pretty interested by the fact, right-handed on earth, right-handed in heaven. And again, a hand. So
Mhm.
I remember thinking I want to raise my right hand. And as I did that, I paused and I asked, is this the divine will for my life? That a medical mistake would send me on. And I didn't even get the whole thing out. All I could get out is this divine. And my question was known and my question was answered. And the answer was no, it's not. But whatever you decide, if you decide to go on to heaven or decide to go back, you go with all of God's blessings and mercy and care and love and grace. There isn't a wrong decision. And that meant so much to me. After all this decision fatigue, back in the day shortly after suicide, I couldn't even decide what to wear in the mornings. So I bought 12 white polo shirts and 4 pairs of jeans so I could open my closet and don a white shirt and put on a pair of jeans and be done. So
Mm.
this thing of no wrong decisions was massive. And so I said, okay, that's great. I'm doing the door. Basically out of my way, clear a path. I'm doing the door. And then as this happened, I had a very, very, very strong vision. And that's not even the right word. It was like I was in a room with somebody else who could not see me. But in
Mhm.
this room, that nurse who had promised me I wasn't going to die, she was sitting on a little metal stool in the middle of a hospital supply room. She had her head in her hands and she was sobbing very hard.
Oh.
And through tears, she said, I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her. And, several people have asked me, was this a concurrent event? No, I believe it was a potential future. But it wasn't a vision. I've used that word before, and that's not really accurate. It was more that I had been put into this room and saw this, and she couldn't see me, but I could see her. And then I thought to myself, you know what? She's about my age, probably retirement age. She's done this a long time. I'm sure she's lost patience before. She'll get over it. I have to go. I very specifically remember thinking those thoughts. I need to be on my way. I can't go back to that mess. And even with that promise of restoration, I thought I want out. I did 59 years, hard
Yes.
59 years. I want out. And then I was ready to go, and then I didn't just see that nurse. It was as though that emotional agony that she had felt was at the core of my being. I experienced, almost co-experienced her sadness and her grief. And I recognized that depth of sorrow as the very thing I had experienced after my husband's suicide. And I realized honestly what I thought. I thought if I can spare one person this much pain, I have to go back. And
Yeah.
it was, talk about a hard decision.
I bet.
Uh, And I remember I put my right hand back at my side and I thought, it's kind of funny, but I thought, it's going to ruin this nurse's day if I die. And so my right head went back to my side, and in a millisecond, I was back on that gurney. All kinds of exciting things happening now. I was in
Nice.
a different room. And I remember when I opened my eyes, that nurse, that same nurse, she was right in my face. And she said, pretty sternly, by the way, she said, what is your name? I said, Rosemary. What year is it? 2018. Where are you? And I said, a crummy excuse for an ER. She took umbrage at that. And then I was thrown into a gurney, and I mean that they were I think they were pretty concerned that if they didn't get me out of there pretty fast, I'd die on them again.
Yeah, I bet.
And they threw me on another gurney, and the hospital took me to a trauma center about probably 20 minutes away. And there I was there for several days. And there's a lot of cool things about this, but one of the things, the next morning when I got the real doctor at the hospital, the doctor that was about my age, the one who's been around a while, I got the real people once I came back from the dead.
Nice.
Uh, he sat down beside me, handsome, delightful man, older gent, and he said, "You had a heart attack." And I said, "Not me. I ride my bike, I walk, I eat my fruits and veggies, not me." I did say to that poor man, "Look at the name on that chart because it isn't Rosemary." And he said, "No, no, it was you." He said, "We've done blood work." He said, "You had a heart attack. Your enzymes are elevated, telling us you had a heart attack last night, but they're already coming back down, so it's not underlying heart disease." And he said, "What happened last night? You lost so much blood, your heart stopped." Actually, he
Mm.
said it went into VFib and then stopped. So that was pretty cool because my first words in this new experience was, "My heart has stopped." I thought, how do I know that? But it was right. And then a lot of things happened after that. I was in there for several days, and they had me on a liquid diet because they were very concerned the bleeding might start again.
Mhm.
And I got sent home, and I didn't want to go home because they were so nice to me. When your husband does this thing, it scares everybody. And I had become a social leper. I lost all my friends. People weren't dropping by the house. People weren't inviting me to their parties. It was so nice to be in a hospital bed and have these nurses come in and take care of me and say, one of the things the doctor said, or some doctor, I can't remember, some doctor who came in the room at some point said to me, he said, oh, they had packed me with gauze at some point, to trying to stop the bleeding and everything. But he had told me at some point, he said, "We're keeping you on a liquid diet." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if you start bleeding again, we're going to have to take you into surgery immediately and do an emergency surgery." And what he said that really got me was he said, "We're not going to let you die." He said, "This is not going to happen again. And this is not going to happen on our watch."
Well,
And I
that's
thought, the first time in 29 months anybody ever looked at me and said, "We care about your life. You need to hang on, and we're not going to let anything happen to you." And it just meant the world to me. It really did. And I know we're moving right along here, but one of the things that happened is I really felt like I was still 95% in that world and 5% in this one. And when my friends would leave the hospital room, I was still not quite right in the head because this had been kind of a big deal to bleed to death.
right.
But when my friends would step out, the angels would come to my bedside and keep me company, and they would sing to me. And I could see them so clearly. People are like, "Well, did you see it in your mind's eye?" No, I saw those angels, and there were a bunch of them. And they come and they stand by my bedside and they would sing to me. And I was on 100% bed rest. I mean, I couldn't even get out. They wouldn't even let me out of the bed to go potty. They would sing to me. And I would say to the angels, "I am really good with houses. I'm not so good with melodies and lyrics. I will not be able to remember this." And I was crying the whole time because the music was so beautiful. The words, their songs glorified God. It's just so beautiful. And they said, "This is not for you to remember. This is for your peace. This is for your joy. This is for your healing." And they also said, "This is a thank you for agreeing to come back. We know how hard it is to return after you've been to heaven. So this is our thank you." And that was life changing. I remember that every day too. I've told this story probably, I don't know, 50, 60 times now. I do a lot of podcasts, but that thing about the angels always gets me. So on and on it went. I got discharged from the hospital. I said, "I don't want to go home. Let me stay longer." Because they
Right.
bring you food, these nice nurses come in and they bring you food and they bring you jello. And if you say, "I feel like I want some apple juice," they bring you apple juice. It's just a miracle. And and the nice doctor came in and he said, "Rosemary, I understand you don't want to go home." He said, "But I thought this was pretty cool." He said, "We sat down." He said, "These aren't my decisions." He said, "We reviewed your case this morning with several doctors, and your blood count is still so poor." He said, "You are now at risk of an opportunistic infection,
Mm,
from a low white blood cell count." And
yeah.
he said, "And if that happens, if you get MRSA or there's something else, a staph infection," he said, "that we're not going to be able to treat you." He said, "That could easily kill you." He said, "So the risk of you bleeding to death is minimal. The risk of you getting an opportunistic infection is great." So they actually discharged me to a convalescent center, but I was able to cobble together enough people. You find out who your friends are. This is no joke. You find out who your friends are when you
Mhm.
call them up and you say, "Look, I want to go home. I've been through a bad thing or a hard thing." And I said, "I died." And they had to bring me back. And your friends rally. And then you do find out, all those fancy friends my husband and I had, never saw them again.
Oh my.
But your real friends rally. And you know what? Those are the people who, like everybody else, are trying to figure out how to pay their electric bill. They don't really have a lot of time off. They don't have a lot of money. But boy, those are the people who come to your rescue and jump into the fray to save you. So it was a remarkable experience. After I got out of the hospital, I sold off all my worldly possessions, sold my car, bought a slightly used Prius. I sold my house, listed it and sold it in 2 hours,
Oh, wow.
which was good because at that point I'd sold so much furniture I was sleeping on the floor on a mattress, which is pretty interesting. My husband had loved to collect fancy furniture. That
Oh,
all went away. So yeah, at the end, I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor, which was fine. I loved it. I wanted to be shed of everything. The happiest I'd ever been in my life was floating away from my body. That was the most perfect joy I've ever experienced. I thought I don't need stuff. It isn't about the stuff. So I got rid of everything, donated a bunch of research materials, and I loaded up my slightly used Prius C, drove 1,000 miles due west, and started a new life in the Midwest.
wow.
Oh, and PS, I guess the important PS to all this, when I came back, it took some time and it took some tests, but one, I felt like a completely different person. As a friend said, she said, "You left as Rosemary V1, you came back as Rosemary V29," which is true. I skipped a lot of upgrades. And it took some time, it took a second surgery and everything. But and I had to find a new oncologist. Turns out when you say you've been healed in heaven, they're like, you're starting chemo Monday. You're showing up, right? uh,
Right.
the subsequent surgical biopsy revealed that not only was there not one cell left, as the doctor said, but she said my flesh was so pink and pretty and perfect. She said if it weren't for all these tests, I would never believe you even had cancer. So it was a very dramatic healing. But, I don't want to minimize that. That was great. That was important. But the healing of my soul was healed completely. That was a much, much bigger story.
Hmm. That's really, really profound. Now, do you believe that maybe your experience in heaven maybe provoked you to um, I don't know, when you were shedding all of your worldly possessions, was that something that you just felt incensed to do as soon as you got home, or was that a process?
You know, I've got some I've done a lot of talks and such, and a lot of them ended up on different social media sites, but I actually had a neuroscientist drive from some distance to meet me because she said, when I heard you sold everything and changed everything about your life and moved 1,000 miles to start a new life, she said that was the most important part of your NDE to me. She said, human beings don't change that fast, that quickly. She said, that tells me that something profound happened. After my husband's suicide, several people said, no, or some people told me get out of town, go start a new life in a new place. And I was like, I don't have the energy. Moving out of your city is hard. Moving any distance is very difficult. But after this, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to be shed of everything. And if you had asked me, I really liked my stuff. I had good stuff. I like being around my stuff. If you had asked me, will you ever sell everything you own, go all kung fu and move? No, no, not
Mhm.
me. But I did, and it felt great. With everything I sold, I would stand in front of the couch, the nightstand, the lamp, the patio furniture. I'm amazed I didn't. At one point, I put a price tag on the dog, but she didn't like that. Uh, I really like my dog. Uh, I would say a little prayer, and I would say, this couch, this nightstand, this light, whatever, has been such a blessing to me. But God, it's time for somebody else to enjoy it. And I met so many lovely people. It's just like all the right people came into my life at the right time.
Nice.
And it's just so different for just to be able to be shed of everything and to get rid of everything. And I don't regret it. I don't reach for something and say, "Ooh, that's gone." I actually moved in with a family member and moved into their spare bedroom. Actually, it's my brother. He had been recently widowed. So that turned out to be such a blessing too. Such a wonderful blessing. And I wasn't alone. I lived in my brother's beautiful home, and I liked cooking for him. I liked being with him. I craved beauty. That was the other thing. When I came back from this, all I wanted to see was beautiful things. You know, whether it was the frozen ice crystals in a mud puddle, or the way the corn swayed in the wind on these 1,000-acre farm fields out here in the Midwest, or maybe just the way a flower opened up in the morning. I craved beauty, and I saw beauty. We walk by beauty all the time, and we don't stop and say that's quite a thing there. And I learned how to see beauty, and I learned how to be grateful for the tiniest of things. And this is kind of silly, but at one point I'm out driving these back roads. I live in a rural area, and I ran over a squirrel, and I killed a little squirrel, and I
Mm,
had to pull over and cry. It really got me.
yeah,
So I changed. I changed a lot.
yeah, I bet, and it kind of more profound made you a different human. Uh, kind of
Yes,
improved your human experience by showing you where you went from, what you saw, and then came back to experience and share your message of hope, so to speak. Um, so, can I ask you a question?
sure.
Do you believe that your prayer life previous to your experience had anything to do with you going to heaven?
That's an excellent question. I had considered myself very religious, spiritual religious, whatever word people want to use. And after he killed him, I had been praying for my husband very faithfully. The day before he did this, we were in our kitchen, and we were standing in the kitchen, and he was in front of the refrigerator, and he said, "I'll be dead soon." And I literally pushed him up against the refrigerator, playfully, loving, but I really was crazy about him.
Mhm.
And I said, "Don't say that. Take it back. Take it back. Take it back right now. Don't say it. Don't even give voice to such ideas. Please. I
Mm.
pray for you every day. You must know how much I love you." And I told him very bluntly right there in the kitchen, I said, "If you die, I won't be far behind you." I said, "I can't live without you. Please take it back." And he said, I mean, he had this hauntingly hollow look in his eyes. I remember it. And he said, "You'll find someone else."
Wow.
And then he walked out. And I didn't know the plan. I didn't know there was a plan, and I didn't know he had a plan, but there was a plan.
Mm.
And after his death, I just kind of waited to die. I had a financial advisor, a friend of a friend, financial advisor took me aside, I guess 6 months after my husband's death. And she said, "Rosemary, where do you see yourself in 2 years? Like, who cares, And I said, "Oh, I'll be dead by then." And, she didn't like that because I'm sure she was a fan of a devotee of all the prosperity gospel guru people. But I meant it. I knew I could not survive this. I knew I wouldn't survive this. So yes, I've been praying for my husband when he did this. And what do you do when you realize your prayers were not only ineffectual, but now your husband's dead? So I really I lost my rudder. I lost everything. I didn't know. How do you pray? Last time I prayed for somebody, they put a bullet in their head. How do you go from, how do you rebuild your prayer life? So
Mm.
it was very hard. And I did pray. I did go, what actually, the way I started to crawl out of this pit was I put affirmations throughout my house, my rental house. I taped up these affirmations, Bible verses or just pithy sayings. And when I would walk through the house and start to have a panic attack, I could just turn around and look at a wall and say, "Have that mind in ye, which was also in Christ Jesus," or
Mm.
"You are a new creature in Christ every morning," or "God will give you a flourishing finish," or something. And I
Mhm.
would say, okay, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's all I got. That is all I got to cling to. And mental health care in this country is a train wreck. My daughters, after this happened, tried to find a psychiatrist for me, and the soonest appointment they could find was 3 weeks out. And we don't know how to do trauma in this country. And one of the things, I see my book scrolling past there, which is really cool. One of
Mhm.
the things, if I have the resources, one of my dreams, very dear to my heart, is to start an advocacy group for suicide widows. Um, I had just landed in Boston when I got word that my husband had done this thing. So I had to turn right around, go back to the airport, get back on a plane, try to get back home. As the plane is starting to taxi and I've still got my phone on, I get a call from the cops. And they say, "What was the nature? We understand you and your husband had an argument shortly before he killed himself. What was the nature of that argument?" And I thought, "Are you kidding me?" And I said, "This is not an appropriate question. This is not an appropriate time. And if
Right.
you wish to have a discussion with me, we're going to do it in person. I'll be home as fast as I can get home." But so many of my friends, I have a lot of friends that are suicide widows also. If you want to ruin somebody's life, if you're married to somebody, you really want to trash their life, do this, because you know what, you become the surviving spouse becomes a prime suspect in a homicide investigation.
Mm.
It is unbelievable. 50 years ago, when a woman was sexually assaulted and then she had to go through questioning and everything, well, why were you wearing that miniskirt? Did you really
Right.
need to wear those leather high heels? And what were you doing out at 3 a.m.? And why were you in a bar?
Mhm.
And now we have the sense to have advocacy groups that help. We should not, when a woman has just found out her husband blew his brains out, we should not sit her down with the cops and have her have to go through an interrogation. Well,
Right.
where were you when this happened? What was the position of the body when you discovered it? If you saw he was dead, why did you move him? And it's wrong, 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 wrong. Anyway, but and also
Yeah.
suicide survivors, as we're known, those of us who've lost someone to suicide, depending on whose statistics you believe, are 12 to 48 times more likely to end their own life. So now we have a known risk group. You want to talk about suicide prevention? Look at the known risk group of suicide survivors. But what really happens? We can't find mental health care. Sometimes we can't afford mental health care.
Yep.
We're ostracized by society. I went for one of those altar calls at a church service where they say, you want prayer? Come on down to the front. Come on down. We'll pray for you. I went to one of those, and this was in a church where they knew me, and they said, what do you need prayer for? And I said, I'm losing my mind. My husband killed himself. And they said, uh, uh, we need you to confess your sins before the Lord. Okay, well, you know what? I could have been a better wife. Well, now we need you to confess your sins. And I said, well, you know what? Sometimes I was a shrew. And they said, you need to confess your sins before the Lord if we're going to pray effectively for you. And to my credit, and this is 3 months after he's done this, I
Wow.
said, what are we going for here? And she said, a man like your husband would not have done this thing without a good reason. And
Wow.
that was the last time when they say, come on down for prayer, that I ever went down for prayer. So my point in this story is we provide no support to women like me, or it's not just women like me, it's anybody who loses somebody very close to suicide. There's not psychiatric help, there's not spiritual help, and there certainly isn't societal or community help. Everyone likes to keep, if you've been through a real trauma, people like to keep you at arm's length because they're really frightened that whatever happened to you might happen to them. Keep it
Mhm.
out of thought, keep your distance from dark thoughts. You don't need to be around people like that. So, yeah, that's why it's probably one of many reasons that we're 12 to 48 times more likely to end our own life.
Yeah. That's it's like the system in America is a tragedy in and of itself. I mean, we don't have healthcare, we have sick care. We don't have anything.
Well, and shortly after this happened, I mean, this less than 48 hours, my three daughters came to town, and I had lost the ability to swallow liquid, food, anything. Not surprising. And I don't know if this was 2 days out or 3 days out, but my daughter took me to an urgent care center, medical care thing. And I'm in the room with my youngest daughter, and the doctor comes in, and I'm sitting on the edge of the examining table, and he comes in the room and has my folder in his hand, my manila folder, and he says, "So, ladies, what's the problem here?" My daughter looks at him and says, "It's my mom. Her husband killed himself 48 hours ago. She can't eat. She can't drink. We have to do something for her." The doctor, again, a man about my age, probably 50s, he literally reels back into the wall, very dramatic, in this tiny examining room, and he says, oh my God, my Aunt Bertha's husband did the same thing 45 years ago, and she was never right in the head again.
How inappropriate.
Right,
Wow.
and my daughter, who's a young woman, I mean, I guess she was late 20s at this point, she said, "Doctor, that is not helpful. Can you help my mother or not?"
Mm.
And he ended up writing a prescription for, I think it was 90 benzodiazepines, powerful tranquilizer, and I was able to eat occasionally. I still ended up losing 40 pounds and frankly looked pretty rough.
Mm. Wow. That's You've been through a lot. I was gonna ask now, with all of that being said and your return from heaven, do you feel like a lot of your burden was lessened after you came back from heaven?
Dramatically so. I had been so angry at everybody. I had been angry at my husband. I'd been angry at mostly angry at myself. I mean, I remember being in my basement at my one of my houses. This was 2 years out. I opened a box of stuff. I had been into ham radio, and I opened a box of stuff, and I saw my ham radio stuff in this tote, and it took me back. I hadn't seen that stuff since I'd been in our marital home, and it took me back, and I said out loud, I mean, I thought I used to ask him to help me buy this stuff. Ham radio stuff's expensive, and I
Mhm.
I said out loud, "No wonder he killed himself. You were a terrible wife. Look what you made him buy for you."
Mm.
And I had to go sit down and cry for a while. So, yeah, after this, I forgave him. I forgave myself. I forgave the people who abandoned me. I forgave the people who said stupid, stupid things. I forgave everybody. And that was so liberating. And I also understood a lot. The angels explained things to me about him, and I felt absolutely set free. I mean, it was like I had been living in hell, and I saw I had been rescued from hell. I mean, I'd been taken out of hell and shown that this was not what God wants for your life. And, the Bible says, if I make my bed in heaven, thou art there. If I descend into hell and make my bed there, thou art with me. I had set up housekeeping in hell. I just figured I would live out my days in a cesspool, not unlike that movie, What Dreams May Come, where the
Mhm.
woman ends up in the upside down house.
Right.
I would have been happier in a place like that. I was in a hell beyond what words can describe. And after this, I just felt like I had been born again. I mean, honestly, one of the things that get to me, I wish more NDEers would talk about this, uh, it was pretty confusing. Had I really come back to Earth? Because everything was different. I was different. Nothing looked the same. People didn't look the same. I cried a lot. I
Mm.
saw the beauty in everything. I didn't feel. I really wondered, had I gone on and I didn't know it, was I now in heaven? But heaven looked a lot like Earth because that was my experience.
Mhm.
Because everything had shifted. There's I don't know who said this, but if the filters of our perception were cleansed, we would see everything as it truly is, perfect. And I felt like the filters of my perception had been cleansed. I saw everything completely differently.
Wow. That must have been just I can't even venture to guess how cool that would have been. I mean, it's not cool that you went through all of that, but the whole experience of being in heaven and back. What did the when you talk about angelic beings, what did they look like? How did they appear to you and how did they sound?
The sounds were, it sounds goofy, they were otherworldly. It was like the most perfect music you can imagine times 1,000. And what they looked like was so neat. They were tall, maybe 7 feet tall. They had a human-esque form, and they were made of light, sparkly light. And it's like they were wearing light, almost like a gown. And when they sang, their sparkles got more bright. They got more bright. It was like somebody turned up the rheostat, and they just got brighter and brighter and brighter. And as they sang, their music turned into sparkles, and it would go up. And they stood on either side of my bed, and the sparkles would go up and go over the bed and hit the ceiling and then just kind of splay across the ceiling. And it was quite a light show. But yes, they were human-esque form, tall, and wearing these gowns of light. And I know that sounds out there, but I saw them and I will remember that. I would say till my dying day, but I have a feeling on my dying day I'll see it again.
Nice. Were any of them any different from the others, or they were all basically the same kind of angel?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. I would say there were nominal differences, but not a lot. I mean, you could see they were individuals. It wasn't just one glob of light. You could see these were individual beings. I guess, they were varying heights. I don't know. And, I can't really say I saw their face. I saw that they had a head, but I can't really say I could focus on their face. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that.
Hmm. So you could like they didn't have any like facial features or colored hair or anything like that?
Well, you know what? The the light coming off them was so bright. I guess they did, but I couldn't see. I couldn't see facial features because the light was just so intense, so brilliant, so remarkable. So yeah, I guess not. It was a light show. But I do remember lying there crying. And the best analogy I can come up with, it was like somebody had put 100,000 amps through a 60 amp box.
Oh, wow.
It was just too much. And yet I didn't want him to stop singing because it was all so beautiful, but it was, I will remember that forever.
But, like, they're, like, blindingly lit, but it didn't hurt your eyes, you didn't have to squint to
Right.
see them?
And it was, my background's in architectural history, and the most white paint actually has a little bit of blue in it.
Mhm.
That's how you make a brilliant white paint. And but this was perfect white. This was brilliant, intense, perfect white. But yes, I could look in their face, but it was, I don't know. You just see light. You just see light and sparkles and beauty. I don't know. That's one question I've never been asked about before is their faces. And I looked at them, but I kind of looked at them as a whole. I didn't stare into faces. I was just like, oh, all the angels came back.
And when you could hear them speak, now, was it like audible, like we're talking, or was it in your head that you heard them talking? Was there like any kind of pitches or anything like that that you could hear when they were speaking?
When they were speaking, I guess I would say it was in my head. But the thing is, you think you've heard something, like if well, for me, I pray for guidance and I think I hear a direction. This was very authoritative and very clear. And so, yes, I would say it was in my head, or I guess telepathic. But boy, was it clear. And some of their explanations were fairly wordy and very helpful.
So did they spoke in a tongue that you not only could understand, but in a, let's say, like a vernacular that was easy for you to understand, like on your level?
Yes. Yes. One example is when I was loaded into that ambulance and they put me in there in a hurry. It's really funny. At that little ER, they couldn't wait to be shed of me. But they threw me in that ambulance and there was an angel. Seemed like one angel filled up the back of that ambulance because, I mean, I'm fresh back from the dead. Probably not 2 or 3 minutes, who knows? Oh, by the way, I was gone more than 10 minutes, which is pretty cool. No heartbeat, no blood pressure for more than 10 minutes. Cool thing about bleeding out is they can't even do CPR because it just pushes more blood out of your body.
Mhm.
So just from a medical perspective, I shouldn't be sitting here chatting away, having good memories. But when they put me in the back of that ambulance, it really felt like there was one angel that filled the back of that ambulance. A great big angel just stayed right with me. And I know this sounds, again, out there, but I had an oxygen mask on at this point and, needles and stuff going on and IVs and such. But this angel kept telling me funny jokes and funny stories and just these quips, these funny, funny things. And I remember laughing and laughing and laughing. And I would take the oxygen mask off, because it has the elastic bands. I would take it off so I could laugh better. And
Mhm.
I remember saying out loud, "You're a stitch. You're
Mhm.
really funny." And the attendant would always lean over and he'd snap it back on. And I know at one point he said, "Stop doing that." But the angel, so you ask about the vernacular.
Mhm.
The angels knew that I guess that I really like funny stories.
Mhm.
And I'm so sorry I can't remember what they said, but they just one liner after another about the experience, where I'd been, where I was going. Didn't I like the room I was in at the ER? I mean, just it was really, really funny. And I laughed all the way to the hospital. Had a great time. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking, and the funny thing is, from my home to that little standalone ER, that ambulance stopped for the lights, no siren, doo, 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 doo. When I went from that little ER to the trauma center, it was lights, it was siren, and we were flying. We were moving. I mean, you could see the telephone poles going by really fast. So apparently they took me seriously at that point. But I remember looking out that little window they have in the side door of the ambulance, and I thought, you know what? I was dead 5 minutes ago, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. This is great. I'm having a great time.
Oh, wow. But I want to thank you again for being able to come here and talk about your experience with everybody. And thank you, everybody in the chat. I'm sorry I wasn't able to talk about your questions. And thank you for being here on Infinite Inquisition. Really appreciate your listenership and your watching the show as well, being here with us live. Now, Rose, would you like to tell everybody where they can find you and your book?
Yes, you can find me at my website, temporarydeath.com. I'm not a fan of the term near death experience because I wasn't near death, I was temporarily dead. But yes, my website's temporarydeath.com. There's a contact Rose button. My book just came out about 2 days ago, and I see it scrolling at the bottom, Remembering the Light, How Dying Saved My Life. And by the way, that title is for real. I do believe, had this not happened, it would have been a very different ending.
Well, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, and I feel that's a message of hope. I think that's
Thank
why
you.
you were brought back, so you could enlighten other people with your information, and thank you for spreading that around. That's pretty awesome of you. So thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming back.
Thank you very much.
And you have a good night, Rosemary. And thank you everybody for watching and being with us here on Infinite Inquisition, which is a Dark Horse paranormal production. And right next is Bigfoot and the Bunny with their special guest tonight. And so don't miss them. They're going to be right here in about less than 5 minutes. Thank you again, Rose. Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Thank you.